You are now tuned into the Essence Show. We are not okay. Come together as we discuss ways to take action in an effective, productive way. The Essence Show and 950 Lounge Network presents a very in-depth and serious conversation of action. Thank you for tuning in.
Introduce Nyreida Herman, who is an educator who works with our youth, who also is very much involved with sex education. She is not speaking on behalf of DOE, but she is an employee of DOE. So she, I know, has a lot of experiences with racism. I want to know about any racism issues within the children themselves. If even sex education kind of brings some type of certain preferences between different races. So I'm going to give her the floor. I want her to introduce herself. And thank you for joining us, love.
Thank you for having me. How's everybody?
How you doing, Kevin?
Maintaining.
You maintaining? Good.
Prayerful and optimistic. That's my hashtag I've been using. I'm sticking to it.
What's your hashtag?
Being prayerful and optimistic.
I like it.
Yeah.
I love it. So the floor is all yours, baby girl.
So what do I say? Okay, so my name is Nyreida Herman, like Diasen said. I've been in education for most of my career, over 17 years, primarily teaching adolescents about sexual health, and working closely in the school systems, juvenile justice system, and working with foster care individuals. So I've had a lot of experience working with youth across the board, coming from all different types of walks of life. When it comes to racism, being a person that is Black, and I am also Puerto Rican, I've experienced that. I've had experiences my whole life. I can recall one experience I had when I was in high school, where it was probably really the most blatant experience I had. Me and my best friend and another friend from high school, we went to eat in the Lower East Side, and not even mid East Side, and we went to a restaurant, a little diner. And we got some food. We ordered actually dessert because we weren't hungry, just wanted like ice cream sundaes. And the waitress was white, and she seemed to have a problem even that we were sitting. I think it could have been a mix of, we were people of color and we also were young. So it could have been the ageism and our race. She just didn't want to treat us. She had an attitude taking our order. So she finally took our order, and we noticed that everyone around us had water. And this is back in the day when everyone would get a glass of water on the table, whether you asked for it or not. Right. And we were like, well, we didn't get water. And it was the summertime, so it was hot. And we were like, so we asked her, can we have, a round of waters? And she sucked her teeth, was really upset. And she ends up just bringing the water like 10, 15 minutes later. We already had got our ice cream, and we're like, where's the water? When the water comes, we're about to drink it. And when we notice, the glasses were filthy. They legit looked like she took them out of the pan that they collect from plates from different tables. Wow. There was a cigarette butt in one of them. There was lipstick on the other cup. There were things floating in the other cup. Like, it was legit. Like, she just picked them up out of the pan that they pick up and just gave it to us. Oh, so we said, Miss, these are dirty. And she just was like, what? And walked away. So that was probably the first time that I had an experience with that. I was like, wow. And we were the only people of color in the restaurant. Say that again, Kevin.
Did you think at that time, while going through that, was because of the color of your skin? Because I know you mentioned you was younger, but when did you feel like, wow, we're being this is your first experience with being racially, profiled? Did that hit you in that moment, or was it just anger?
It hit me because there were other younger people in the place as well. Right. And I didn't see, it looked like everyone was being treated very nicely. And the waitress was going around checking, is everything okay? Do you need anything? Literally, she took a long time to come to us. And then when she took our order, she took a long time to bring it back. She never checked on us. So it was like really obvious, right. Being the only people of color in the place. It was just, you couldn't deny it. There was no other reason for it.
Right.
So that's probably like one of my first experiences where I would say it was like in my face. And through that, you have little racism here and there that sometimes you can't even prove, but you know it in your gut that that's what it is.
Yeah.
I worked for someone where my supervisor was very passive aggressive, and again, you don't want to call someone a racist, but then when you see the treatment of other people around you, like, what's the difference? There's no difference between me and that other person besides our skin color. So I have to assume that that's what it's about.
Right. Absolutely.
And that was that time in my life when I was supervised under that person, I remember having like anxiety attacks before going into work, because whenever I had to see her and have a meeting with her, I would sit in my car crying because I didn't want to go into an environment where I knew I was going to be very uncomfortable. And it was a hard time. I used to tell my mom, like, I got to get out of this position, because she was making a job that I love some place that I hated to be whenever she was around, because she would just make me that uncomfortable.
Right.
I want to dive into your profession, because you're dealing with young people who, in most cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, their perception of sex or what sex is what they view from the music, misogynistic sounds, the visuals, and where, again, to the subconscious, racism and slavery plays a role.
Definitely.
I mean, the old additive about the black buck, and that's still being used now, where we see a lot of that, especially with the black athlete. And that starts not just in the pros, that starts in middle school and high school.
Definitely.
The perception that women, and we see OnlyFans is probably, stock is probably going through the roof, because every female has an OnlyFans page. I don't knock that, but your thoughts dealing with young people on sex when it plays to race, light skin, dark skin, black, white, what have you, your thoughts and how you have to try to mold those minds and what's fantasy and
what's reality
to what's reality.
And any remarks or debates that you've had with them or they have among themselves, please share.
So that's a loaded question. First, I have to start with the first part. The first problem with sex education in general is not something that has been put on the forefront when we talk about health education, especially sex education. It should be taught from K through 12.
Thank you.
Right now in our public school system, we only require high school to have health education that includes sex education for them to get a credit, and middle school is also required. But again, there's no one making sure that is actually happening. So a lot of students aren't getting education. And then we go down to elementary, it's just not happening, far few in between where students are getting it. Now, people always think sex education, they immediately think sex. Sex education is not just sex. We're talking about sexuality. We're talking about your gender. We're talking about intimacy. We're talking about reproduction. We're talking about so many different things that make a person who they are. And if you're not having those conversations with kids from an earlier age, they get lost and they start getting the information from outside sources, and sometimes, a lot of times, the wrong information. So that's number one. Let's start there. That's a big issue. So when it comes to young people, yeah, definitely. We think about just women of color. We've always been sexualized. So you look at a young girl who may develop earlier. So you look at a young girl that may be 9, 10 years old, and the outside world's looking at her like, oh, she's a grown woman because she already has a developed body. So they're being sexualized already. So then if no one's not teaching her about value or teaching her about her body or anything, the wrong person getting her ear into her things that she shouldn't be hearing, or she's not getting value from other places. The wrong person will give her a sense of false value that, oh, I appreciate you, I value you, but if you have sex with me, your body that's all you are, it's just a body. And not putting value in anything else. Right. Our young men as well. I've had a lot of conversations with young men, just in general, when we think about the message of sex and virginity and everything. Who's the message heavily towards? Males or females? Who's the message to?
The females.
Females, right?
Yeah.
Very rarely do we talk to young men about values, about their
anything.
Bodies, about protecting
Right.
themselves, about valuing themselves. It's always more that message towards the women, like, you have a virtue, your virginity is very special, you have a flower, whatever analogy people use. When you lose your virginity, you letting someone take something from you, taking your innocence, all the stuff that people and young girls are always taught, and young boys don't get that same message. So when they interact with each other, there's no confusion. Why there's a confusion? Because they're getting two different messages. Right. So the young girl is thinking, okay, if I have sex with someone, this is a way of maybe me showing that I care for him, or I care about this person, so I'm willing to share my virtue, my body, and give something of myself. And they're going to respect that because they're going to know that it's so special what I'm doing. And then the man is like, okay, it's just a physical act. okay, this is nice, this is good. And they're not thinking that it has the same weight.
Well, I think again, as we're talking these town halls, and my background understanding with black men, I used to coach youth football for many years and working with young men. And again, those conversations come up, but it goes back again, in my opinion, to the beyond the crack era, the heroin era, where again, the systemic voice of putting black men behind bars, where there's not the raising of the black family. So again, where is a kid going to get that but on the street? Where's a kid get that but watching TV and movies? Where again, you know, I have this thing attached to me that, you know, gets, you know, rises up like bread every couple of times when I see something that arouses me. And again, not having men, and I say this a lot because I don't have a child through birth, but I think it's all of our responsibilities to help raise our young men. Similar to what I mentioned to Thomas earlier, is that you got 1 out of 2 kids graduating from high school and, you know, not having anything going for themselves, and all they feel is I got, you know, my third leg. It becomes where I'm going to dominate. It becomes Law of the Jungle. It becomes a mindset where I'm just going to take what I want. And I think, again, like you mentioned, it's got to start earlier, but it starts with self-respect, and it starts with having men raise men. And I think that's where we're missing a lot. And it even goes back to slavery, when the black family was detached from each other. So babies had to raise themselves. And we as a people, we have to, again, and I keep mentioning this every time we share these mics, it's about planting seeds. And I keep saying, we got to plant a seed. We got to have our men protect our women. Because when you start to feel that way, it strips you of looking at that woman as an object, or she's a certain name that we won't mention. Because again, it's my job to protect her. That's what it was many years ago. And the strip and the demasculation of the black male has forced that. I don't knock anybody. Your beliefs are your beliefs, or who you love is who you love. But the demasculization of where I can't stand up to myself, and a lot of that has to do with police brutality. All these things are circles.
Oh, no, definitely, Kevin. Right. When you're talking about like slavery times, you're thinking about how they would literally rape and beat their women in front of them, letting them know, like, I got power over you and there's nothing that you can do. So you're right. Definitely breaking down the black man is part of the larger issue. So we do have to get back to the black family, get back to the man being the protector and all those things, and having males be positive role models in our community for our young men. I totally agree with that. They all play hand in hand. What I'm seeing again in schools is a lot to do with that. We have a lot of our young people who are growing up in single parent households. A lot of them don't have fathers in the household. Like, you're right. So they don't know what it means to be a man. As a female educator, there's so far I can go to give them education, but I can't give them that missing piece because I am not a man. So I'm not going to have the man experience. I'm not going to have certain things to share wisdom with them. Right. So that is important. That's why it's really important that we have more male educators, especially in health education. It's very far few in between males, but the males that I've come across, they're awesome. And I continue to always support them because we need more males to be in that field and educate our young men about how to just conduct themselves and how to appreciate their mothers, their sisters, their girlfriends, whatever, their friends in the world. Yeah, we need it. Definitely. I think that education, again, just going back to that K through 12, we need to have it. We need to have these conversations earlier and earlier, and not talking about sexual activity, obviously, with a kindergartner or a first grader, but talking to them about just their bodies, having them have a positive self-image of their body. For me, I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old. My son will never say pee-pee or any other cute name for his penis. It's a penis. And I teach him that because I want him to be comfortable with saying that and not feel like, oh, this is something that I can't talk about. I'm just like, just how you say this is an elbow, we don't give it another name. We don't give leg another name. Why are you giving body parts, the private parts, a different name? It teaches kids that this is something that we can't talk about, or something that's bad, or something that's taboo. And that's the wrong message you want to give kids, because if something was to happen, they may then start thinking, oh, I can't talk about that because that's an area that we don't really talk about. So if someone touches me in that place, I'm not going to bring it up because I've been kind of taught to keep that private. No, talk about it. So he says penis, he says vagina at 4 years old. And that's correct because that's the body part. Anybody who hears it is offended. Why? That's literally the name of the body part. He's not saying nothing crude. He's not saying nothing. Obviously, actually, I think the other words are more crude that people use. And it's so interesting that people are so uncomfortable saying penis and vagina. Whenever I do anatomy lessons with my kids, even my 6th graders, I always start with, on 1, 2, 3, we're going to say penis as a class. And the kids, they laugh because they think it's so weird. But I'm like, why is that such a weird word to say? They've been conditioned not to say it, but they'll say D-I-C-K, they'll say P-U-S, like nothing. And not feel embarrassed to say those words.
Where did that come from as an educator? Now, again, it's funny because if my mother hears this, my mother didn't use that either with me either. And I, again, but where did that come from that we as people, and I say black and brown because a lot of us experience that, but where did that come from as an educator where we were afraid to use the real words of penis, or even me, look at me, I'm saying
everything was hush hush.
Right.
Everything was hush hush, and it comes from people associate penis and vagina with sex. So no one wants to talk about sex. And it's so weird because our society, we're so filled with like sexualization of everything, but still people don't want to talk about sex. Why do you think we're fighting to get sex ed in school? And it's like so funny, but it's in the cartoons, it's in the music, it's in everything. Sex sells. It's in,
why not?
You're gonna buy a soda, it's sexual undertone. You're gonna buy anything, it's a sexual undertone, but we don't want to talk about sex in education stands because it's like, oh, we can't bring that up because it's gonna encourage people to do it and young people are gonna want to do it. No, you're actually taking away the curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. A lot of times young people engage in behaviors because they don't know about it. So a kid is asking a question, oh, you're too young to know about that. No, if they're old enough to ask, they're old enough to get a question, get the answer to that question. Obviously, you tailor how you're going to say what you're going to say to them, but you give them an answer. Don't leave it up to, I'll tell you later. That's not for you to know, because guess what? They're going to find that answer somewhere, and it may not be the answer you want them to know, and it may not be correct information. So that's the problem. I think that people associate penis and vagina only with sex, so they don't want to talk about it, especially with a young person. Like, oh, I'm not going to bring that up because it's about sex, so you don't even need to know that. That's a toto, that's a pum pum, that's whatever. We're not going to say what it is because that's a sex thing, and it's not a sex thing. It's a part of their sexuality. It's a part of their body. That's life. It's a body part. We make it more than what it needs to be. A 4-year-old's not thinking about a penis in a sexual way. Not thinking about. We're thinking about it in that way. We sexualize everything.
Rectum. He calls his behind a rectum.
Well, I haven't told him rectum yet, but I will teach him rectum. We haven't got to rectum yet. But yeah, this is the idea that, I don't want him to be ever ashamed of his body. And actually, anybody who knows my son will say my son's like a nudist because he like gets out the shower and runs around and he's very comfortable. But I love that he's comfortable in his body. And I know that if there was something ever to happen, he's not going to be afraid to tell me, this hurts or this is going on, because he tells me, he communicates, and that's exactly what how I'm trying to raise him.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll come back and we'll continue this town hall. It's the Essence Show, Nothing Lounge Town Hall. Come on back. Okay, bring it back in.
All right, so
4, go.
And we're back with our We Are Not Okay Part 2 Town Hall. Right now we are speaking to Nyreida Herman. That is an educator, sex educator, part of DOE. Again, I will announce that she is not speaking on DOE. She's just sharing her experiences. We were talking about how we need to teach our children at a very young age, as far as back as kindergarten through 12, about sexual education, which is also health, wellness, right? Because there's so many things that come after that. And we were talking about how you're raising your baby boy who's 4 years old, who's also biracial, which I also want to speak to you about how is being a mother right now. I know we've spoken behind the scenes and there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fears, a lot of tears, a lot of confusion, when to talk, when not to talk, what to tell him, what not to tell him. You're Latina and Black, your family is both as well. You've had some experiences dealing with racism in your own world. I'm sure your parents have, your dad's security, your mom, can I say that she's been retired from corrections? So, there's a lot going on. She's also Puerto Rican, but she can look Black. So I could only imagine what she went through in her experience being an officer alone at Rikers, you know what I mean? Which I should have had her on. We'll talk about that another time. But can you just explain to us, like, with the, first of all, how schools and parents can contribute to this change? What can you hold them accountable for, since you're active in all this? Also share a little knowledge of how, when you conduct a class, when you were doing that, because you still do, but right now you're behind the scenes. How were the kids interacting with each other that were different races? Did you see anything that kind of, let's start with that.
So interestingly enough, I didn't have that issue white against black, because most of my schools predominantly were black and brown students in the city, which is a whole nother issue. New York City has the biggest segregated school system. Our kids don't intermingle in our school system. That's just a big problem that we need to fix.
Black and brown, you mean? Or you mean?
Meaning like we don't have
black and white.
Our schools are not integrated. Like they're segregated. Like you have schools that just have black and brown, and schools that have predominantly white. You may have one black kid in that school, or you may have one white kid in the other school, but they're not really, right. They're not really integrated, which is just crazy in New York City, right? Yeah, and we have the largest school district in the United States, and it's segregated, which is a problem. So I don't see it necessarily racism as far as that goes, but what I do see is a lot of prejudice against each other. So we have the black and browns. I had a lot of those conflicts, and the Puerto Ricans against the Dominicans, and the Puerto Ricans, Dominicans not necessarily messing with the blacks. And I've had many instances with that. Even myself, when I would come into a classroom to teach, they would see me. Most people would immediately say, she's black. And as soon as I open my mouth, you would see confusion on their faces. She's not black. What is she? She sounds. So I'm trying to teach, and the students are like, but miss, wait. Okay. Before you continue, what are you? And I know what they mean, but I be funny. I'm a human. No, miss. No. But what are you? I'm a female. No, miss. Seriously, like, where you from? And I'm like, I'm from here. And I know what they're getting at, but that's not the point. I'm trying to get them away from that. And sometimes they would not let me continue teaching because they were having this debate about where I'm from and what race I am.
Why do you think that was so important to them?
I have no idea. I have no idea. And all I could think of is, are you not going to listen to what I'm teaching you if I'm black and I'm not Dominican, or vice versa? I have no idea, but the students would get into this big debate about it. Sometimes I would end up saying, okay, I'm black and Puerto Rican, and then you would see the Puerto Rican kids are like, oh, I knew it. And the Dominicans, oh, all right, whatever, you got that one. And I'm like, but what is that? What is that about? We're all here in the same space. We're all here to learn what my ethnic race is, or why does that play a role? And the students don't have no answers. They don't even know how to even answer that. But that's a bigger issue we have just in our own community amongst each other. So I didn't really experience too much of the racism with white kids because my students were mostly black and brown. Now, as far as what the schools can do a lot. Our school system needs to really look at the curriculum. Our curriculum needs to be more culturally inclusive and not just talking about the experience of Black people when it comes to civil rights movement and slavery. We've done much more contributions to the world than that. And I feel like they need to make sure the curriculum is more inclusive and shows all the contributions and not just the struggles of Black people in this country. And I know that a lot of times people always have this debate about some of the lessons, even with sex ed. People always say that's for the parents to do. So some people might say, oh, racism, that's for the parents. That starts at home. Sex ed, that starts at home. The reality is, in a perfect world, yes, we would hope that these conversations like racism and sexuality are happening at the dinner table at home with your parents and your family, so you can get their values and get an understanding of what it is. But the reality is that that's not happening in every home. For various reasons. Sometimes parents are just not willing to have that conversation. Sometimes parents just can't have that conversation because they themselves don't have that information and that education, or they just are not there because they're working crazy hours or whatever the case may be. So unfortunately, as an educator, it's going to happen in the classroom. And the reality is kids spend most of their time from K through 12 in a school building. So they're going to get a lot of their skills and information from you. So I think this curriculum definitely has to be culturally inclusive. Teachers and educators need to understand that if you are signing up to be a teacher, that's part of your job. And it's not just saying, oh, I'm teaching what's in this curriculum and the textbook they give me, but sometimes go outside, get other resources, educate yourself, number one, so that you're making sure that all students in your classroom feel comfortable and they feel visible, and they don't feel like, oh, we only talk about people that look like me only in February. And the rest of the month, the rest of the year, we're talking about all other kinds that doesn't even relate to me, I can resonate with, so I'm checked out. And I don't really care to hear about this because I don't see how I'm relevant. So we're not saying that every lesson has to be, but just how if you're talking in science class and you're talking about something, bring up a scientist that was Black. Bring them into it. It could easily fold us into anything. Talk about math and math class. Bring someone who was a mathematician in there. Bring it in. Just fold it in so that people can start seeing representation of themselves throughout and not just in history or just like, okay, this is the month that we're talking about this. I just feel like it's sad that in 2020, students are still just learning about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. They were amazing, but there's so many other amazing African Americans that made amazing contributions that we do not talk about. Students do not learn about. And we need to make sure that our curriculums are definitely showing all of that.
And they're censored too. You know, what we learned wasn't really truth. You know what I mean?
That's a whole nother thing. They always say they teach us their story. You know, it's his story, not ours.
Do you find it that maybe the school teachers are scared to kind of go like outside of the curriculum?
Definitely.
Are they able to do that?
Well, if you have a supportive leadership, so I would say in some schools, depending on your leadership and your admin, some admin definitely have like their own politics and they run their school the way they do. But then you have some admin that are very supportive and they actually encourage you to step outside the box and they want you to do X, Y, and Z. And I say if you're in a school that your admin is supportive, run with it. If they're allowing you to do things, run with it. And it may be little changes. Maybe you start with like a little after school club of kids that maybe want to have an interest in learning stuff. Maybe you start small, but the bottom line is start somewhere. Don't just ignore the issue and say, oh, it's Black History. I'll do a little lesson on it, Black History Month, and then I'm done. Checked off. We covered that, and we're finished. It is very interesting too, with like LGBT community. You know, people fighting for more LGBT inclusivity in the schools as well. And it's like I feel like they've moved closer to working that out, but we still haven't handled the racism. It's like, okay, that's great that we're working towards making sure our schools are LGBTQ friendly and inclusive. That's awesome. Everyone needs to be respected and welcomed and feel like they're visible. But we still haven't handled racism. So let's handle that as well. That needs to be on the agenda as well.
Kevin, do you have anything to say?
Nah, well, obviously I'm definitely listening and definitely engaged in this conversation because I think, again, like Whitney Houston once said, the children are our future.
Yeah.
But from a standpoint as an educator and somebody who's in the community, you're not shuffling off to, you know, Orange County after work. Obviously, this has become a major issue now with our police department, our public officials that have residences in Washington and Maryland and claim they're you know, dealing with things here in New York. Do you believe our educators, even though, again, they do yeoman's work and I do not, and I know you work for the DOE, so this is not a debate, but just your opinion. Do you believe our educators should be zoned as well? Whereas they're going to the same supermarkets. They know Mrs. Johnson because not just because of Little Johnny, it's because they use the same supermarket. They know each other because, you know, they go to the same beauty parlor. They live in a community where now I understand. And while, yes, I'm a teacher and my job is from 8:30 to 3 p.m., you know, I'm still a teacher on Saturday if I see you doing wrong. I'm still a teacher on Sunday.
They're a community leader.
Right. Is it fair? Number one, two part. Is it fair that I'm making that statement? I think teachers should be more responsible, and also number one, should that be the case? Your thoughts.
It's an interesting question, Kevin, and I have to say that it's complicated. On one hand, I think that if someone is qualified and they've done the work and they are approaching teaching with a cultural lens and they've realized about how all those things interplay and they're doing their best to educate the students that they're teaching, I don't want to hinder that person or say, oh, we're not going to hire that person if they're really qualified and I know if they're doing the work they need to do.
Right.
On the other side, I played the other role, like you said. I'm a resident of the Bronx. I used to teach in the Bronx and Harlem primarily, and I used to run into my students all the time. And there's something about that relationship, and that I will give you a quick story. I'm in the supermarket, Western Beef one time. I'm on the line. It's super crowded. It's a Saturday, packed. And a student, one of my middle school students comes in, they're like, Mommy, oh my God. They get excited when they see you. They almost think that you're not a real person when you're outside of the school, which is funny. Mommy, oh my God, it's Miss Nyreida. And I'm like, hey, how are you? And then it's like, mommy, this is my sex teacher. She knows everything about sex. She knows everything. And I'm just like, oh, okay, great.
He
So then
wasn't
there's
with
like,
his father.
no, he's with his mother. But it's funny because there's a gentleman behind me on the line. He's like, oh yeah, you know everything about sex. And I'm like, no, sir, no. But I love it because they remember me. And I even see sometimes students that I haven't taught in years because I live in the Bronx. They still live in the Bronx. And I run into the beauty salon, get my nails done, whatever. And I love it because there's that relationship and that community connection that they also know, oh, she's from the hood. Like, she's from my area. Like, I know your struggle. I lived your struggle. I am part of your struggle. Right. And there's something valuable in that aspect of the relationship that I think also helps kids come to terms with their own stuff, and then also gives them a little bit of hope. Like, oh, so Miss Nyreida lives in my neighborhood. She's somebody that I look up to. She's a role model. And okay, she comes from where I come from. So it's possible for me to achieve my goals, my dreams, whatever they may be, because I see someone living proof who comes from where I come from, who looks like me, who is still in the community, but she's doing things. She's a positive role model. She's educated, whatever the case, or whatever they feel about me or how they see me. I think that there's a value in that someone coming from outside the community is never going to have.
No question about it. You know, it's funny because I have a niece that I always call my pride and joy, and she wants to be a teacher. And I see that passion of, you know, even though she's young herself, and she's 28 looking like 16, but that passion of
black don't crack.
Well, look at me.
I know you like 75, right?
Your mouth to my ears, to the people. But I see that passion in her to want to help and reach out, even as a young person yourself. For kids or young adults who begin graduation, and you know, obviously we're in a time where even the most educated can be the most unemployed. Give a synopsis or explanation why they should look into going into teaching.
Oh man, you're gonna get me emotional. I don't want to get emotional.
I do.
It's it's the most rewarding career you can ever have.
Yeah. I
always used to tell Rody this all the time. Like, I'm not making big bucks. I'll never make six figures or like half or more than that. Probably it's a shot in the dark. And the more you remove yourself to try to make the six figures is the more you get removed from the kids. You're not working directly with them. And the passion for me is with the kids. There's nothing like seeing a young person being in a situation that they are hopeless and they feel like they have nothing and no one and their life is worthless. I had a young man that he always brings me to tears when I think about him, because when I met him, he was that kid that he was in high school, foster care system, he was 18 years old, still didn't graduate, and he was just like, I'm not doing this. I'm done. I'm never going to get out of here. I'm done. And I'm like, no, you could do it. And I stayed on him and I stayed on him and I stayed on him. And he graduated last year at the age of almost about to be 20, and he did it. And I went to his graduation, and it was just it was an amazing feeling to see him walk across that stage. And he had the biggest smile, and he just thanked me. He just kept thanking me like, I did this because of you. And I'm like, no, you did this for you. You just needed somebody to believe in you. And I feel like a lot of these kids just need someone to believe in them. And if you have that passion, there's no amount of money that's going to compare to that. Like I feel like I'm a part of creating the future. Like, I'm gonna have a hand in those people that are gonna spark change, that are gonna do amazing things. And to know that that I can be a memory for someone that when they're like 40, 50 years old, like, oh, I remember Miss Nyreida taught me this. And I still have young people now that are in their 20s, their late 20s, and they tell me, I actually had a young woman reach out to me recently. And she said, Miss Nyreida, I always remember everything you say to me. And like, I'm in a relationship and I was dealing with something, and I'm like, no, what would Miss Nyreida tell me? Like, oh, she would tell me this. She's like, I remember everything. She's like, and I pass it on to my friends and I tell them, this is what you have to do. And I love it because I'm like, wow, like I affected their lives. Like, I changed their lives in some ways. And that's something that I don't think in any other career I would have been able to do.
Now, I think,
and it's amazing
when you look at this full mosaic we're having, this is how we even started these Townhall series were about what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And there's people like Travis, there's people like Thomas, and there's people like you, Nyreida, that again are serving different forms of the battle. You know, while other people are fighting for those laws and those rights, you're educating people. So now that next generation can go out and be lawyers and doctors and politicians and may I say presidents, because they're now able to take what you've given them, that base, and now spew it to the world. So I salute you. And the fact that, you know, you get emotional, and I'm learning something about you too. I mean, we've known each other now for a little bit, but just hearing that from you just goes to show this is your destiny. And I thank you as somebody who, you know, who's worked with kids, and some kids you say, man, I'm just tired, but you're not going to give up on them. And
can't give up,
because again, that miracle you saw, that young man will remember that forever, and hopefully he goes on to do great things. D, we got a few minutes left. If you want to wrap it up, we got a virtual Kleenex.
I'm always crying. Well,
making me all cry.
Yeah, I wanted to know, well, first of all, you know, as a very, 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 very good friend, I'm gonna hold you accountable to make those changes with that school system about
definitely
education.
on it already.
You know, all of that. And like Thomas had said before, you know, we need to get like groups and council groups in there, like not there, you know, we don't want to scare the kids, but we need like talk groups, because I don't even remember that either.
Listen,
guidance counselors for college.
It's,
you know,
that brings a whole nother thing, you know, with all this COVID-19 stuff and all that's been going on. The DOE got hit hard with our budget for next year, and one of the things that got hit was our health education. Which doesn't make sense, because health education gives you the skills for life. So when we're talking about mental health, that's health education. You talk about social skills, that's health education. You talk about just health literacy and understanding how your body works and all that. That's all health education. So you're cutting a big chunk of the budget for that, which if a student doesn't have good social and emotional health, I don't know how you expect them to perform academically well. So when you're talking about, I want this student to excel in math and English and social studies, but the kid is stressed out because of things that's going on at home, or the kid is living in a home that they're not getting adequate meals, but we want them to focus on busting out those SAT scores and taking these regions and excelling high, and it doesn't make any sense. I can't focus on that if I'm worried about where my next meal is coming from, or I'm having things going on at home with a parent, or a parent has a drug or alcohol addiction and that's not being that well, or I'm in a house where I'm being sexually abused and I don't know who to turn to or talk to about that. You want to cut health education? That makes no sense. We're in a pandemic. Health education also talks about disease and prevention. You want to cut health education? Okay. That, you know, so things like that, we need to figure out where we're going. Health education provides a lot of skills and tools that young people need just to survive and be healthy and productive adults. So that includes mental health, social health, emotional health, relationships, all that stuff. It's so vital for young people to have those skills. So that's the first thing, definitely making sure that we are teaching our young people these skills so they can be productive adults. And for me, I'm going to continue to be the example. Continue to do my part and always find courage to speak up in spaces that I may not feel comfortable always to speak up, but getting the courage to speak up and say that's not right, or we must do something, or that has to change.
Is there anything that our communities can do to enforce these things in the school system?
Be more involved. And I know that that's hard for some people because of their schedules, but I feel like parents have more power than they know. Be more involved. Go to those PTA meetings. Go to the school. Show up. I want to sit in on my daughter or son's class. Sit in the back. Observe. See what the teacher is teaching. See how they're teaching. You can be involved. And I feel like just sometimes I always feel like the ones that have parents that are actively involved, they get a better education and different education than those that don't. Why? Because they feel like, someone's checking up on this kid, so let me make sure that I'm paying more attention. Because the kid that they notice that no parents ever showing up for a PTA, no parents ever like involved, doesn't come to anything, they don't even know what the parent, never met the parent, those kids sometimes fall through the cracks because they feel like, you're not really paying attention to this kid. No one's advocating for them. No one's saying anything. No one's looking out for them. You have to. Even like for me, my son's 4, but I'm always advocating for him. He was in pre-K this year, but I'm always advocating. I'm at that school. I'm talking to people, even with my busy schedule. I'm calling them on the phone. I'm checking in. They know who I am. You're going to know who I am. You're going to know, oh, that's Mikkel's mother. Yes, you're going to know that. So that my son doesn't fall through the crack.
When he get older, boy. My mama and the man is back at school again.
Listen,
We'll love it
and it's not about that. It's more just so that they know, I feel like sometimes things will happen and then it's like no one says anything, and then that's how things fall through the crack. And then next, your child is being pushed along or put somewhere, and then they're quick to want to label our kids, especially our Black and brown kids get labeled at a higher rate. I was having this whole thing with my son, that my son's birthday is in December, so next year he has to go to kindergarten. But I was like, I don't know if he's really ready for kindergarten, especially because he didn't really have pre-K this year.
Right.
And they were like, because his birthday's in December, he has to legally go into kindergarten, and I couldn't keep him back in pre-K another year. And I'm like, but he's the younger one out of all the kids in his class. So you're going to be comparing my child to kids that are developmentally more mature than him, and then saying he's falling behind because he's in a class with kids that are about to be 6, and he's only going to be turning 5 later in the year.
Because he has a late birthday.
Yes, he has a late birthday. He's right before January.
Yeah.
And I was trying to advocate for that. Like, this is the law, and it's funny because the law came into place because because parents from low incomes needed to go to work, so they had to push it where kids had a place to go.
Right.
So now, if we didn't have it mandated for kindergarten, then where would parents that have to go to work, where would their kids go when they're 4 or 5 years old? I get it. But this is the problem that we have. We need to fix all these systems. So now my son has to be going to school. I feel like the cutoff should have been a little early, maybe September. But you go into December right before January, he's always going to be the youngest one in his class. Yeah. And he's always going to be compared to kids that are much older than him, developmentally wise. They're going to be at different milestones because they're older. Yeah. And then they're going to say, your son is falling behind. He's not doing what the other kids are doing. Well, he's not their age either.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like a trap.
We need a summit on education as well. And
definitely.
This has been great. You've enlightened me.
Thank you.
I've got an education.
Awesome.
I'm ready to take your class.
I'm going to give you a gold star, Kevin.
Thank you. I'm still waiting for a hot meal that you promised me years ago. We ain't going to go there. But again, thank you for your thoughts and ideas. And again, if we had a fleet full of teachers like you, we'd definitely be better off. Salute to you. Appreciate it.
Nyreida, do you have any advice for individuals that are raising a multi-racial or Black, Latino boy now in 2020, after all of this has come forth?
Just love on them. I want my son to, he has an abundance of love, and I love that he's affectionate. He gives it back. Continue to speak to them and educate them. I want him to feel confident. I don't want him to ever feel like he is a bad person or he should be feared. I have my own issues and concerns just because my son is also big for his age, and my son will always probably be big for his age. He gets it honestly. His dad is 6'4", his grandpa's 6'5". So he's taller. He's at the 99th percentile of his height and weight. So he's going to be big. So I think about that, and I think about my big Black son, and I fear that people are going to look at him as a threat. That's something that I'm not totally prepared for. And I cry about it sometimes because I just see that, to me, he's my baby, but people might look at him as something other. Just continue to give him examples. I'm glad that he has a family. My father, my brother, my uncles, my cousins, we have a lot of strong Black males that are leaders, and they are amazing and educated. And I'm so thankful that he has that as an example. So yeah, keep loving him up, let him see, let him know his worth. So I think that's all we can do, and keep fighting for change, that our children can live in a world that is different than what we grew up in.
I think that's why we're here, and continue to not let this thing die down.
Definitely.
We got to continue. I'm sorry. I just want to
go ahead.
We have to, I just wanted to say thank you to you two for having these town halls, because I think it's so important to have these conversations. A lot of times people are uncomfortable having conversations about sex, about racism, but we need to. And I feel like change only comes from when you're uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
So
And
we need to keep having these conversations and these spaces to do so.
Absolutely, because these spaces are going to create action. And that's the whole point of having the discussion. Everybody can have discussions. Everybody can talk, but where's the action? So everybody that's on these panels weekly, me and Kevin make sure that we hold them accountable, and we will plan another panel to update us on what people have, what their progress has been.
Definitely.
You know? So thank you for joining us.
You're
I love
welcome.
you to death.
Love you too.
And be safe out there, okay? And you're doing amazing as a teacher, as a mom, and as a friend and individual. So be proud.
You.
Okay?
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.